Hello, I'm Clare. I'm Chief Executive of the National Rheumatoid Arthritis Society, and I'm joined here with Katy Pieris. Welcome, Katy. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yep, thank you, Claire. I'm Katy. I'm 38 years old, and I've now been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis for just about 10 years, and it was July 2011. So I was 28 years old, if you couldn't do the maths. It was quite a shock to the system, sort of being diagnosed with a long-term condition, because I'd always been quite a sort of fit, healthy person, partaking in sort of sports and exercise. So I found it quite traumatic being diagnosed with something that was sort of very sort of serious, and sort of having to understand that and knowing how that was going to affect my life on a sort of day-to-day basis. When I was diagnosed, I was really struggling to sort of walk to the train station for my commute to work. I was struggling to sort of take a shower, get dressed, all those kind of simple tasks. So the biggest thing for me was, how was I going to get myself back to as normal as possible, as quickly as possible?
And did you know what RA was when you were diagnosed, or was it something you had to go away and research and find out what is this disease?
So it took me sort of about a year to actually get the diagnosis. So probably the last trip to the GP was when rheumatoid arthritis was sort of highlighted to me. But I didn't really do anything until I'd been to see the rheumatologist and it was sort of formally diagnosed. But I'd done a little bit. I knew sort of roughly what it was. I knew that my grandma had it, but I didn't know much about it.
What were some of the symptoms that made you think something's not quite right here?
Yeah, so initially, I think I had sort of quite classic symptoms that it was my sort of feet that were sort of quite stiff, quite painful. And then it moved to my sort of hands, fingers and wrist joints. But I never got the sort of inflamed joints, as you might see in sort of a classic example of rheumatoid arthritis, but it was more the sort of stiffness and the pain for the first few hours of the morning. So anything sort of walking, kind of anything like opening cans, opening milk bottles, brushing my hair, that sort of thing was really tricky and sort of painful, but confusing because I couldn't understand what was causing it.
And at 28, quite frightening, thinking,
yes,
what on earth is going on? I'm 28. Why is this happening?
Yeah. And then I think there was a bit of sort of ignoring and not wanting to go to the sort of GP too much. And then there was sort of frustration. I was living with he's now my husband. At the time we'd moved in, we'd been moved in maybe about sort of a couple of months. And then he'd got a sort of decrepit person living with him, which wasn't really part of the plan.
You were worried that, my goodness, what's going to happen to this relationship?
Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, I laugh about it now, but at the time, I guess it's not that funny.
It must have been a real fear, definitely.
Yeah.
This is not what he signed up for.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
So, and of course, RA can impact on every aspect of your life.
Yeah.
You were struggling to get, up and ready and do the commute to work, etc. And again, at 28, nobody's really going to be thinking that they're going to struggle to do that.
No.
Lots of fears and anxieties, I'm sure. So when you were diagnosed and you got that diagnosis and you started on medication, what were some of your thoughts and feelings at that point?
Well, I think I was quite scared about taking medication, to be honest, because I've never been somebody that sort of pops a paracetamol for headaches or hangovers. So not that I'm against medication, I've never really needed it. So being told that you're on medication for the rest of your life is quite scary and not something that I would have predicted.
And in those early days of taking medication, did it work immediately? Did you suddenly feel okay, or was it a lot of trial and error to get it right at the beginning?
I think I've always been really lucky with my medications that I haven't sort of suffered a lot of the sort of side effects, but it did take quite a bit of time to get onto the medications that worked together and worked for me. So I sort of started off on methotrexate, and then sort of other medications were sort of added as sort of time went by. So I think I was on methotrexate for sort of 12 weeks, and then doses were upped and that sort of thing. And then different medications were kind of put in place.
But then we've just heard the announcement from NICE, which is the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, that they're now going to allow people with so-called moderately active disease to access some of these advanced therapies. Now, you're on one of these advanced therapies, a biologic. But what was that process to getting to that point?
So for me, the process actually began when we decided we wanted a family, because obviously methotrexate is not a medication advised to be on when sort of wanting to conceive. So I was lucky, not lucky enough to have the right sort of DAS score to enable me to go on to a biologic. But it was quite a long process to sort of get to that point, to kind of start the biologic, to then come off the methotrexate. So it was a very long and sort of well managed approach, I guess, from my care team.
What difference did it make to you and your quality of life when starting the biologic that you were put on?
So I would say actually, so I've been on 3 different biologics throughout my time, none for any reason other than depending on where I was in that sort of pregnancy process, and the biologic that I guess was the preferred by my team at the time. And all of them for me, and I know it's different for everybody, have worked very quickly and have completely changed my quality of life. From the biggest difference for me has always been the sort of fatigue that it's brought under control, but also just the very slight, like a massive improvement just on sort of the smaller symptoms of sort of slight inflammation that I didn't realise was bad until I was on a biologic, and it like immensely 150% improved. Mm-hmm.
So your mobility, your ability to get going in the morning, and of course now being a young mum with a little handful.
Not sure about young. I'm getting on
now. You know, having that early morning stiffness before and now almost having that eradicated must make a difference. Because
and actually coming out of having a newborn, so at that point I wasn't on an advanced therapy. I was only on a sort of not so good, not so good medication, I would classify it as. And then once I went, so my son was 9 months old and I went back onto a biologic, and the change was amazing in terms of the quality of life of just being able to kind of manage being a mum and sort of picking him up as he's getting heavier.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think will be the most significant difference now for many people that may have access to these advanced therapies that were denied it before because of the threshold? What would your thoughts be if you were back in that situation now and weren't quite reaching that magic number but were suffering? What would you say to the people that this may now impact?
I think it'll just give people a complete new lease of life that maybe they hadn't realised that they'd lost. Because I think as your disease progresses and you maybe kind of adapt and change to your disease and sort of change your lifestyle a little bit to kind of make yourself cope with it better, moving on to an advanced therapy will completely kind of make you a new you, I would say.
And that's, that really gives a lot of hope to so many.
Yes,
and, it's not a cure. but it certainly is giving back that ability and mobility and capability. And I think reducing the disability, I think.
Yes, and it's sometimes disability that you don't realise you've acquired.
Because it's a slow progression.
Yes,
and as you say, you start to do things differently, to adapt without almost consciously being aware that you're doing it, until suddenly you realise you don't have to do it. It's even just simple things, kind of like typing at work, that you kind of take for granted being able to do, but you probably realise you've maybe adapted or slowed down. And then when you've got that mobility back, everything's so much easier, or you don't feel like you need to take breaks as much, or, you know, it's just, which you should. Yes, indeed. So, but that's really great. Thank you very much for sharing a little insight into that, the difference that these sorts of access to these medicines can make, and not just the impact to you, the individual, on that treatment. You talk about your family. The fact that you're more able now to be active, must make a big difference to your husband as well.
Yes, no, definitely. And actually there's a great photo of me sort of on holiday in Italy, kind of in a queue falling asleep, which this is pre-child, which hopefully now I wouldn't be doing.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. That's been really useful.